Hey everyone, this is Frictious again with another tutorial. I was asked recently to go over the rack that I use. As I said, this is inspired by Funtcase, and it's not your typical rack. Um, it is basically like the same thing, just over and over and over. But I can go through and show you how all this works. Of course, I can just upload the rack file up to Dropbox and let you guys play with it yourselves, but I do believe that there is some merit in knowing that how it works, because obviously, like if you're a new Reason user especially, this can be a little overwhelming since it is just more than just your typical 14x2 mixer. So let's go ahead and get started. I already have an empty rack over here. We can just start building it in one by one. But to go over the basics, instead of your 14x2, especially because I produce more house and progressive music, I have everything broken down into a line mixer, a 6x2. So I have like my drums on this track, basses, mid synths, leads, etc., and which is going straight to my mastering suite in here, which I have dance right now. Sorry, wrong button. I have dance right now. I usually tweak these things and add in my own things to get the mastering right. Basically, though, Reason kind of sounds like it's in a box by default, and you can really tell after you master it. Like it sounds almost like you're opening a box or opening the door to a room, like as if you're listening through it, like with a wall in front of you. So it really helps with this template. So moving on, so we have, like, for example, the drums on this first track right here. You can see drums, and if we flip it around with all these wires, you can see that the drums track is plugged into this mastering suite, which is called drums. So we have the drums right here, and then this drums is then plugged in. This mastering suite is then plugged into this line mixer, or sorry, this 14x2 mixer, which is also called drums. So like you can't see my finger. Drums right here is from drums mastering suite, which is from drums mixer, and then in the mixer, then we have all our combinators for the drums there. Now you'll notice between the drums and the mixer, you have these reverbs and then these 3 different EQs. Now when you look at each one of these, for example, you have the highs right here and then a high pass filter, then you have the mids right here and the mid filter, and then a lows here and a low pass filter over here. These and the reverb are all on these 4 auxiliary knobs. You can see here that they're all plugged into these auxiliary spaces, so that when you turn up one of these, it's turning up and sending that through this, number 1 is on the reverb, so when you turn up 1, for example, you're turning it and letting it through the reverb. This is, of course, different than just turning on or plugging a reverb onto, example, this kick drum track, because instead of all of the sound being fed through automatically and then messing with the dry wet knob, you have some of the sound being sent through and then some of it being sent through here, and then you can also adjust the dry wet here, even though I automatically have it set to all the way wet. Moving down, you can also see that I have the kick, snare, hat, cymbals, and other already separated out. This way I can go through and have not only multiple kick drums, I usually use 2 or 3, but then I can go through and EQ all of these the kick drums in general without screwing up the snare sound. For example, I want my kick drums to sound really low and punchy, but I don't want my snares to sound really low and punchy. I want them to have more of a crisp high. Same with the hats, I want them to be very crisp and clean. And everything else. So like my other is usually where I just put noise effects and everything else. Moving down, of course, we can see the same thing as we saw on the drums rack right here, where I put my basses. I typically don't use more than 2, so I have my sub and my lead bass. My lead bass is your usual, or just like a low sound that I use as a lead, but isn't like the lead or the melody. The sub is usually sitting underneath everything and just there to add some lows. You'll also see here that I have the EQs turned off, but on my leads I have them turned on. Actually, I screwed up this template and put them under mid-synths instead of leads. I actually don't have a thing for leads, but I've been too lazy to change it because I don't usually use more than just my lead. So even though this says mid-sense, it's actually my leads, and I usually don't use more than these 3. Though I can easily, just go in here and create another combinator right here. I did a mastering suite because I can't read. It's late. What am I trying to do? A combinator. And another thing that I have saved, you can see it says PHR synth rack. I can go in here and do PHR synth rack. Takes a second to load all of it, and this is the exact same thing as this. So it's already set up. So there I go, and now if I needed more than just a lead, a second lead in my chords, I can have a third lead if I wanted to. And I can create an equalizer on that, just like the other ones, which is mostly just for more control over the entire combi output before it goes to the input. And it comes in over here, and I can go ahead and rename this third lead, and there we go, done. It took just a few seconds, and in my combinator, I already have it set up to where I just have to plug this in and start making sounds. I'm not going to be making too many sounds today because I'm not in my studio. I'm actually at my parents' home right now. We're going to go on vacation here tomorrow or the next day, I don't really remember. Anyway, when you look at this mixer, you'll notice that I have my EQs on, and that's mainly because my lead, for example, doesn't need a lot of bass in it, so I turn this EQ on, turn the bass all the way down, and I already have these knobs adjusted slightly to go with what I typically have on my mid-sense. Now I do adjust these, like I usually bring up the highs quite a bit and the mids quite a bit. I usually leave the lows alone because you don't want too much lows mixing in with your sub up here. Moving down again, I would have my leads here, but like I said, my actual lead, since it says mid-sense here, but like I said, I've just been too lazy to change it because I don't need that many synths. Maybe I do, I don't know yet. Then extra, I have a piano here, because I like to use a lot of piano in my music, and I also have an orchestra in some of my songs, where I have violins, cello, violas, bass, etc. Again, same thing, reverb, high, mid, low, same knobs over here, very simple. So once you set up the drums, basically it's the same thing over and over and over for all of these. Oh, and just to go ahead and quickly explain my synth rack, you can see it starts off with a maximizer, but it really starts off, with your, well, I guess you can say it starts off with the maximizer, which is plugged into this line mixer, so you can kind of see the chain. So you have your combi, which is getting input from the maximizer, getting input from this, and I typically use Thor and Maelstrom quite a bit, so both of these are unplugged, and if I'm feeling like I want to make something with Thor, I can go ahead and plug that in, or Maelstrom, for example, just plug that in and it's ready to go. Like I said, I'm not going to make any sounds because I don't have my keyboard here. I could pull up the virtual keyboard just to show you that it's already there. And that's function F4 if you're using Mac, and then just F4 if you're using Windows to bring up the virtual keyboard. But it's already plugged in and ready to go. Also on my buttons up here, I have those pre-mapped to the stuff in here, so you still have 2 equalizers, stereo imager, and compressor. I don't always want to use my stereo imager or my compressor, so I have those mapped to buttons up here. So like if I want to turn that on, just click it. You can see that it's on now. Turn it off, and it's off now. My loudness is mapped to my input gain, so I usually don't mess with it too much, but it is there in case I want to, because sometimes my synths aren't too loud. I squish the sound way down, and it's way down here in the negative 18 decibel type range, and I want to bring it more up here. Sometimes, though, I don't use these buttons for these at all, and I end up unmapping them, and I will just rename them to whatever it ends up being. So there. So anyway, yeah, basic stuff. Have your line mixer, your 2 synths. Sometimes I end up using like a Thor and a Thor, or a Maelstrom and a Thor, because I like layered sounds. And then both of these have the equalizers, stereo imager, compressor. You really want to utilize your equalizers. They can really sculpt your sound and really bring out what you really want to hear. That was a lot of reallys. I'm impromptu speaking all of this, so I apologize. And then the buttons up here, like stereo imager and compressor for the first two, second two buttons for these two down here. And that goes, this is the same rack for, the same combinator for the lead. The second lead looks the same, and the chords look the same. They're all the same rack. The bass is a subtractor in a Thor, because sometimes I use subtractor. It's really great for basses, hence the name sub, even though it is just subtracted synthesis. And Thor, same deal here. Just plug it in and go. This is mostly about speed, because it takes a while to set all this up, especially when you have something this involved. It can take a while to, like, right-click, create, done, right-click, create, done, plug it all, make sure it's all plugged in correctly, etc. And then the sub is just a subtractor on a sine wave. It's already EQ'd the correct way, and these are both on the way that I want them, so that it's putting it on mono under like that range instead of anything else, so that it gives you your nice fat sine wave sub way down below the filters all the way up. So there you go. That's already plugged in and ready to go. I just have to click on it in the keyboard in here, which we're also not going to mess with because I'm not going to be making music today. Alright, now let's, that you have the basic understanding, we can go through and create this sort of step-by-step if you want me to. Otherwise, you can end the video here and download the file, which I can throw up on Dropbox or something, I guess. So the first thing you're going to want to create is a mastering suite, like so, and you can just rename this mastering and take it to whatever you want. But the first thing you want to make after that is the line mixer. Now each one of these is going to contain like your different parts of the song, and then you'll make basically one for each track. So we have like a mastering suite for the drums. It's annoying that it opens it up automatically. Mastering suite for the basses. Just going through your mind like what you usually use in a song. A mastering suite for the mid-sense, or in my case leads, and then a mastering suite for extra stuff. We won't make a mid-sense. And all of these need to be plugged into, not the auxiliary. That's kind of annoying. Maybe we should have done this one by one. Oh well. But into the input. So the output to input, output to input, output to input, etc. And I won't go through and make every one of these all the way through. We'll get the idea after the first few. And there we go. Drums, basses, leads, extra. Now the reason you want these different mastering suites is so that you can, after you go through and make your drums sound good, for example, like you want your kicks sounding good and your snares, then you want them to sound good together, and that's when you bring in your mastering suite. So that's why you have two mastering, because then once you have like the drums sounding good together and the basses sounding good together, then you want the drums and the basses and everything else sounding good together, which is why you have the big mastering suite. So it's mostly for like fine tuning and good control. Now the reverb is kind of specific. We can turn this off because you don't want it to be like too punchy sounding, or too wet sounding, I should say. So hold shift when you make these so they're not plugged in, and I won't really mess with these. It's pretty much the same, so I guess I lied when I said that they're specific. And then you can make your Paramedic EQ, once again holding shift while you're making these, and then the invalid control filter. And the reason you want the control filter, partly because of symmetry, but also because when you want the high filter, you don't want to just bring up the highs, because you're also going to have those mids and lows in that EQ. You also want to filter out the mids and lows, which is where the filter comes in. So you can go ahead and name these like high, and then like high filter, and then just for time we're not going to make all of these, so let's just make mids, just to show you like how it works. And you're supposed to hold shift when you make those. Good job, Matthew. And then there we go. So let's just make those two in, just so I can cheat. I have my cheat sheet here. So this one you want the frequency up, the Q down, the gain up. So that's just this. You can't see my thing. I keep pointing at the screen. You can't see me, obviously. So you just have this high part up. But because you also have these mids and lows in here, you're going to want to like high pass the filter. So you click on this band pass here, which sort of makes a, let's see if I can just make this, oops. A band pass is sort of this sort of shape. So anything above this and anything below this isn't let through the filter. A high pass filter sort of looks like this, where anything below that isn't let through, and a low pass is the opposite, where anything above that is let through. So you want a band pass because then you can sort of carve out the little section that you want. When moving back to this, you want the frequency up, the resonance of course down, the envelope amount, where did I have that? Okay, yeah, it makes sense. Both of these down, because you're just making a high pass filter out of this, and I think the rest you'll leave alone because you're not using up the gate. And then of course the mid looks pretty much like that. Just make sure, yeah, you want the Q just up wide, so you can see that the Q, you know, when it's up, like when you have the Q up, you're not raising much, and when you have the Q down like this, it makes it a much smoother curve. So here you also want this on band pass, and then here, why do I have it on low pass? I honestly don't know. I can't tell you. Oh, I guess that makes sense because I have the frequency up here like this, and then again the resonance out down. Because it's low pass, so because the frequency is up here, then it's kind of letting in this. So if I can show you, it's sort of letting in like this, and then, well, it's hard to show because this is like a wave instead of the opening up kind of. Let's just show you what it's kind of doing here. Basically, the reason I have it on low pass instead of band pass is when you have it on band pass, like I said, it's making this sort of filter. I don't know why my volume's jumping up and down like that. It's making this sort of filter on band pass, and then when you have a low pass, it's making this sort of filter. So because we have the frequency turned up here, it's sort of up here, so it's letting in a lot of the lows and mids and not letting in the highs. So that's all fine and good. So those, we'll just deal with those two right now, and then we'll make our line mixer, or not our line mixer, but our 14:2 mixer. So once again, hold shift while creating all of these. So none of this is plugged in. Now what you want to do is make sure these are open, and you want the output. Well, first of all, you want this output going to your, well, because these are all the same, we'll just go ahead and start with leads because I'm lazy, and you probably don't want to sit here and watch this boringness the whole time. So put the mixer's output into the input of the section that you want, so leads in this case. Then you're going to want the input of this, sorry, so you can see here it says send out. So let's say that we have, if I can just quickly create a synth rack, and let's go ahead and just plug in HUD. It's not open. Open. Like that. And bring up our keyboard so you can hear that sound. Maybe you can't because these are through my laptop speakers. Let's change it to there. You can definitely hear that. So anyway, it says send out here, so all this sound is being sent out through these auxiliary cables. So you want these to be into the input, and then the return, of course, you want the output going to there. So this is on the first auxiliary channel, meaning it's on this first knob. So you can see here where the input is. Bring up my keyboard and put it on hold. So it's just going to hold that without me having to touch it. While I bring up this knob, you're going to see this first auxiliary knob, you're going to see the level being raised up there. So I bring this up, and you can see it being raised in there. I bring this down, it's gone. So up, okay, turn that off. And it's the same thing here, so let's put the input channel 2, the output to the return channel, input channel 2, output, return. So now we have these first 3 here. So I bring my keyboard back, and you can see those highs are really coming up. It's hard to hear because these are coming through my laptop speakers and into a laptop mic. You can hear the highs really coming out. It's going through there. And then we bring the mids up. Oh, sorry, I messed with that freak. Let's see. We can hear the mids really coming out. Now, see, if you notice when I do this by just twisting these knobs, it suddenly makes that sawtooth 6x16 sound much better. Now, like I said, it's hard to hear with a laptop mic on laptop speakers, but even here you can hear the difference. Where if I just bypassed all of these, it sounds, I can't describe it other than it sounds like it's in a box, which is how Funtcase described it. It sounds like you have a wall in front of you. It sounds like you're in a room or something, like you're in the next room listening to it muffled. So when I have this and turn on just a bit of reverb, which puts it kind of in a 3D space, bring up the highs and bring up the mids, then it sort of brings it out of that box. It sort of makes it sound like you're in the same room suddenly. So that's the basis of it. If, like I said, the synth rack is nothing too complicated. You make your maximizer to be just the output, not an auxiliary, which is what I think it tries to do by default. So hold shift when you make this maximizer, but the master output should be going to the input of the maximizer and the output going to, obviously, the output of the combinator. And I don't know how advanced all of the people watching this is, but just as a quick thing, the reason you want it all in a combinator is so that you can have several synths. For example, I have 2 that I can use at any time in here, and I could quickly make 3 here, or even 4, that are all in this line mixer. And then over here, it's creating that as one track. So if I go ahead and just write something, not like that, you know, just, and let's do quarter notes, because that tells me then I am. There, so I have those notes written in, and it treats all 3 of these as one instrument. Otherwise, if you had a track for the Thor, a track for the Maelstrom, and a track for the other Thor, which I can plug in really quickly, boom, now I have another Thor, and I have both of these going on. So I can make this like a multi-oscillator, for example, and you can already hear that it's, well, it's kind of hard to hear, like I said, in the laptop speakers. I can make it easily heard. Why is it so hard to hear in the laptop speakers? Maybe because it's not plugged in. Why is it not plugged in? This is embarrassing. Trying to show you how quickly it is to do all this stuff, and it's not working. I swear it works. I use it all the time. Output is going to... Oh, okay, I guess it is working. I just have the decay down. So you turn like this up, and you can see that it's working. So I turn this down, it's still there, it's just not as loud. But anyway, the point of this is, now when I have the track over here, it's playing both of those synths at the same time, so I don't have to mess with 2 different tracks. Which is the reason combinators are incredibly handy, and especially because you can do this, and everything inside there is now in one line instead of all of this. It's also handy because you can automate a lot of stuff very quickly if you show this programmer. So, for example, let's say I want, how about this automated? So this is actually, like in the programmer, it's instead of, even though it says X, it says filter 1X, it's considered the frequency, I believe, in the programmer. So let's go down to Thor 2, rotary 2, since this is rotary 2, filter 1, frequency, even though it is the X. And there, I can play this and quickly do that, and then even, or almost as quickly, right-click, edit automation, and write something in. Like that, and then go back and play it. And it'll play it back how I wrote it. So that's another reason to have everything tidied up in a combinator. I think that's essentially it as far as how everything works. Once again, like once you get this sound ready, you could just put an EQ in here, but just for the sake of time, I like to have an EQ outside so that I don't have to like open everything up. I can just go right here and like mess with the EQs here, for example. And then I put it into my leads and master it here. So like let's say I went like this and EQ, and I'm not even really doing much. And then that goes into my actual mastering rack, and like let's again like just turn stuff on and just to show you. And suddenly it sounds much, not necessarily better since I was just pushing random things, but it makes it sound much different. I can say that much. So there you go. That's essentially how my rack is set up. I would highly recommend you sort of play around and invent your own. This is, like I said, was inspired by Funtcase, and a lot of it is I'll say copied off of Funtcase. But it really works for me, and what I love about it is how quickly everything is. You see how quickly it is to just plug in one of these and go, versus like doing that versus like coming here and saying combinator and then doing a 6-2 and then doing a Thor, and then because I'll want some EQ on it, and then like I don't have my keyboard, playing all of this and turning off the hold so it doesn't sound like crap, playing all of this, and then realizing that I actually want a stereo imager on there as well, so I have to go through and create that. It slows down the process when I can, like, oh, I know I'm going to want Thor, plug it in, like, yeah, I do want my stereo imager on, I want my compressor on, and then if I really want to fine tune both of them, I can just open them up here and play with them. But it really speeds up the process, and like I said in the last video, when you're creating music and when you're writing music, you want it to be as free and as quick as possible, because when you sit down and like create your combinator and start creating the stuff inside it, you stop your right brain creativity and start your left brain analytics, because it's like you're sitting there and you're even if subconsciously thinking like, well, do I really want a Thor? Maybe I do want like a Maelstrom, or maybe I haven't played Subtractor in a while, and you're starting to analyze everything, so you decide to go with Thor, and you're like, well, am I gonna want to use this stereo imager? Am I gonna want to use the second equalizer or maximize? You start to think about it too much, you start to analyze it too much, and the next thing you know, you like are over on this screen, which I usually have pulled out like this. Oh, maybe that's why. You're over on this screen, you're like, actually, you know what, I don't like this note in here, and I think this should be a little bit short, and then next thing you know, you're not finishing a song because you're too busy fine-tuning these little tiny details that should have been figured out later. When you do it this way, like I said, you plug this in and like oh, you know what, I really did want that, turn it off. You know what, I don't want it, turn it off. Or turn it on, I don't really want it, turn it off. Like I can fine-tune everything in here, and it's all very quick, so I'm in my left brain as little as possible when I'm writing music. Then I can come back the next day and analyze it and master it and tweak it here, because it's very quick just to like pull these up, and I'm not really thinking about it. It's like, I know I'm going to want more highs, pull this up. I know that I want more mids, pull this up. Oh, I didn't show this. Just click this and turn down the bass for the EQ. Sorry, distracted moment. Oh, and just to show you, since I didn't make all three of these, here is the low one. So you have the frequency down, the Q down, so that it's just this curve down here. And over here, you want a low pass, of course, because you're making one of these, and the frequency very low, because you just want basically that amount of sound to pass through. Everything else is, you can see it. So that's that. I think this video is much longer than I wanted it to be. Where is, there's my screen recording. It's showing that it's 30 minutes, it looks like. So you stuck through it. Thank you for watching, and if you have any other questions, just let me know and I will try to make a video as quick as possible. Happy music writing. Yeah.